I love discounts, and so does every consumer. Having said this, if you have churn issues and if you try to combat them with bigger offers and more discounts, what you're ultimately doing is that you're addressing the symptom, not the root cause.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Retention Clarity Gap podcast. I'm your host Mo and strategy consultant here at Yukto, and I'm joined today, as I always am, by George Capernaros, the CEO here at Yukto, aka GK. GK, how are you doing today?
Really good one.
How was your day so far? Is it good?
Day is always crazy, you know how it is. I have meetings and meetings and meetings, and then I do work, and then I have more meetings.
I hope it was good meetings though. So let's just kick it off. Today we are talking about subscription brands and how to reduce churn without discounts. So I'm just going to kick it off with the number one thing that most people think about when it comes to subscriptions. What's the most common cause for subscription cancellations in your mind?
So there's the first thing we should talk about is that there's two types of cancellations, two types of churn. To be precise, there's voluntary churn, which is basically that you don't want to churn, but it happens because perhaps your card is declined, because you are in a different address, because for whatever technical reason you are unable to get the product. That's one category. We're not going to talk about this category. We're going to talk about the other category, which is voluntary churn, which is when people actually want to churn. And if you look across 100 projects, you will most likely see that the most common patterns are the same. It's too expensive to continue. I already have enough stock. I no longer need it. Found a better alternative. Not satisfied with the quality, or I'm not getting results. Those are almost always the top reasons. There might be something related to the customer service or the shipping time and all that, but for the most part, those are the top reasons why people cancel. If you now want to talk about this from a CRM standpoint, like what can we as CRM marketers do, then I would say that the main thing we do badly is that we have either overwhelming / jarring, overlapping is what I mean, communication after somebody purchases, or simply totally irrelevant. And then what this does is that it creates confusion, frustration, and ultimately people don't really understand the value of what they purchase, which is the number one thing you should do in a subscription business model. Think about it. When you buy something, it hurts you once, right? Like you put out your wallet once. The subscription hurts you every time you pay. So there's better be a good reason why you're paying. And unless you communicate this after somebody purchases, there's a pretty high chance they're going to be like, why am I even paying for this? Is it even worth it? Is it better than not doing anything at all? So those are the most common reasons.
Good split there between the voluntary and involuntary. Some people, when they see like churn happening, they, like marketers or product managers, they kind of think about this could probably link to the product itself and it's not good. So how do you decide which customer feedback signals that would lead to like deserve product tweaks versus communication fixes?
Yeah, I see this a lot on LinkedIn. People say, basically what they say is that you should do customer surveys and then you should collect feedback. And then based off of that feedback, you should improve the product. Now that's in a theoretical level, that's good, but in practice, it doesn't really work like that, right? Because the brand may have 10,000 units in stock, and maybe your survey with 100 or 200 responses says those 10,000 units need to be reworked or thrown to the trash, but that's not the reality of the business. It can't actually be done. And this is just something that marketers don't know because they are very siloed from the business. They don't actually work closely with the product teams. Having said all of this, now, like if I had to give you some sort of framework, like guidance on how to know if something is marketing related / communication related or product related in terms of feedback, you should try to cluster the feedback around two pillars. If it has to do with the physical experience, meaning the taste is not good, the texture is weird, everything that has to do with the physical experience of the product, that obviously requires some sort of product tweak, assuming that the payoff and the upside is worth it. Obviously, as I said, you're not going to throw 10,000 units to the trash because you got 100 people telling you I don't like the taste, etc. And it doesn't make sense. So this is one thing. The other category, which is when it has to do with communication and marketing, has to do with expectations versus reality. So if, for example, you are making a promise on your advertising or on your landing page that you're going to take this simple pill and then you are no longer going to be bloated and it's going to work like immediately and you're going to be feeling amazing, blah, 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 and then this doesn't happen. This is not so much a product problem, it's more so a marketing / claim problem. You are over promising and then under delivering. So you can simply tone down the claim. So that's, I guess, the heuristic. Focus on physical experience versus expectations versus reality. Those are like distinctions. One other thing actually that is worth mentioning here is the timing of the feedback also plays a role, because if, for example, you get feedback on the first shipment, like I received this and then you basically ask me, how do you feel about your purchase, right? Like I can't really evaluate the product yet. I haven't actually used the product. What I can evaluate is my initial impression, the packaging, the unboxing, whether this is easy to swallow or not, whether it has, I don't know, some sort of gap. Like, is it bigger? Is it smaller than I thought? Am I excited? Am I confused? That you can evaluate after I get the first shipment. Now, if you do this for users that have received 5 batches of this, or 3 batches of this, or potentially 2 batches of this even, now it gets more into the actual product efficacy. Yes, it does make me feel a little bit better. Yes, there is value. It's worth the price I pay month over month. So the timing of when you ask also matters.
And what does it mean when you're trying to solve for both? Like for when you get feedback from the first order, how do you deal with that versus when you have feedback from the one who got 2 or more?
So to put it simply, if you solve early feedback issues, you will most likely lower churn that happens early in the life cycle. If you focus on solving feedback from cohorts that are kind of like more down the customer journey, you will reduce churn that happens later in the customer journey.
It's a good split. So it depends on your priority at that time and where is the most churn happening from.
Depends on the data. I think what people don't do enough. I mean, this is such a weird thing. People mention words that they don't really understand or things that they don't really measure. So they might say, we're focusing on LTV, we're focusing on retention, we're focusing on reducing churn, all of those things. And then you say, what's your churn? They don't know. Don't really measure it. They don't do cohort analysis to see where is actually the drop happening, where's the business bleeding. So it's not to focus on the priority, it's to focus on what the data is telling you, right? Like, we should always ultimately be looking at data.
Most brands, when someone tells them about churn, just the first thing that comes to mind is like, let's discount for them and they will stay. What's your take on that? Like, does discounts really help, or how do you think about it?
Again, I see a lot of people on LinkedIn, X, whatever, that they basically say discounts are bad, right? Like, oh, don't do discounts, it's a bad thing. I love discounts. And so does every consumer, for the most part. There are some exceptions, but most people love discounts. The thing with discounts is that it's like a tool, and tools have their place. So it's not that discounts are bad or good, it's just a lever that you can use to increase conversion rate at the expense of margin. Nothing wrong with discounts. Having said this, if you have churn issues and if you try to combat them with bigger offers and more discounts, what you're ultimately doing is that you're addressing the symptom, not the root cause. And what you should ask as an operator in a brand is not so much, how do I make this cheaper? But like, why are they hesitating? Why are they not staying with this product? Is it that they don't see the benefit? Is it that they don't use it enough? Did they forget why they subscribed? What's the reason? That's the cause. And that's what you should actually be focusing on. So it is a little bit counterintuitive to be starting with a discount, because the discount could be the answer if pricing is actually the problem. You first need to figure out, is pricing actually the problem though? In most cases, the people that tell you, I said at the beginning, people say it's too expensive, but the people that say it's too expensive are those that purchase iPhones, right? Are those that purchase expensive holidays, are those that purchase all sorts of other expensive things. So it's rarely that it's too expensive. It's more so that I don't feel that I can justify the expense because I don't fully understand what the value of that is. So there's an example that came to my mind right now. I recall I wanted, that was years ago, I wanted to do a training on a company called Reforms that has like very, let's say, advanced programs about growth, retention, like all sorts of things. And I recall back then it was 2,000 euros or something like that. It was like not cheap, let's say. And for whatever reason, the card that I used was declined. I think it was like a bank thing. And I literally called the bank and said, hey, I want to buy this. Can you unblock it for me? So I was like so invested that I wanted to kind of like do it that I called the bank. Now, if you compare this to a course on Udemy that might be like 7 euros or 10 euros or 20 euros, would people do that? I don't think they would, but it's the value perception that's different, right? It's not the price. It's that I thought that this was so good, so exclusive that I even like went out of my way to be able to buy it. So the learning ultimately is, how do I increase the perceived value more so than how I decrease the cost? Those are not opposites necessarily. Like it can be more valuable. Like you can perceive it as more valuable because it's less expensive, but it's rarely the price itself that's the problem.
I see. And how would you go about figuring that out? Like customer surveys and just sending to people who churned, to kind of like qualitative or quantitative or both? Like, are you, which one do you go with?
So I have changed my mind a lot of times on this. Over time, I used to think that everything should be, let's say, research based. So everything should be customer research based, basically. But what I've realized, and I think a lot of people have realized this, is that what people say is not necessarily what they do. So I might say that I'm very eco-conscious, for example, right? That's a common thing that people say, but I won't necessarily be paying something extra because something is eco-friendly. So it's easy of me to say this, but when it comes to acting on it, I'm not actually going to do this. So what I mean to say by this is that the best way to know is to actually test and measure the behavior of people, as opposed to collecting insights and then forming ideas based on what people told you. It's better to see what behavior is. Like what people do is always a better indication of what they say they will do. Behavior is
Good.
truth. That's
The motto.
the quote.
So that's a good way to think about it. Actually, you don't have to kind of be wasting, not say wasting time, but just wasting resources on building those surveys and then coming up with hypotheses and then building a journey around that hypothesis. And then you see that nothing changed. So actually, it saves time as well, the way you think about it. Since we are going to be trying to reduce churn without discounts, so let me give you a challenge, okay? Let's say that you have woke up and you found out that you are in a world that you cannot be using any financial incentive. Okay, which angle or psychological trigger or lever were you encouraged to test first to keep subscribers engaged and not churn? What would that
I
be?
think I will give you a very complicated answer and I will simplify. I think if you are to think about this in terms of short-term wins and tactics, there's a huge list of things like scarcity, urgency, like all of those things that we all know that were in market. And those like work, right? Like you can say that this is ending, all of those things will put pressure on people, people will buy. But if you are to think about this a little bit more strategically, and kind of like set the tactics aside for a second and like be a little bit more long-term oriented, a little bit more thoughtful, and even more impactful, I would say, especially with the long term. The number one thing you can do, I'll then even bring it back into the context of our company to see like how this happens, is to help form an identity around your company, around your brand. That if you are in this community, you embody a certain lifestyle. You are kind of not selling a product, but also selling an identity to people, which in our context, we are all very hardworking, right? We entered this call and you were telling me that like I asked you about your personal life and you responded to me about your work life, which is, again, it shows that to you this really matters. And if you look around in the company, everybody's like this. So I, as the company and the owner of the company, I have successfully sold or perhaps attracted the right people that kind of resonate that we're building something. Like, and if you are here, it's like work is serious and we need to build like a whole skyscraper, right? It's not just a small agency that does CRM marketing. We're building something great and we have great expectations of ourselves. The same exact thing applies to commerce, right? And you can use language that reinforces this. So you can say things like, I don't know, people serious about their wellness, stick with this. If you want to kind of create this sense of identity in your brand, that like you are serious about your wellness, like this is what actual people that want to have like very good health data, they want to be very fit, blah, blah, blah. You can really reinforce this through messaging. And then you can kind of celebrate this as they progress. You are now among our most committed members, only 10% stick this long. Your consistency is paying off. Basically, using tribal language almost, that you are here and you are the, I don't know, the 1% club, right? Like that sort of thing. And then, of course, you can share other customer stories that reflect that. You can share how, like, Mo stuck with this for 6 months and he's never getting bloated again. That sort of lever, the identity lever, I think is the number one thing you can do. And again, tactics have their place, but this is something that's even bigger than tactics. It's like brand strategy at this point. Like, who do we want to be and who do we want to attract? And messaging is the key to that.
I feel this hit a nerve for me, the identity, because it makes you think about yourself versus the product. Like, how would I imagine myself when I'm using this product? And I think that would be great for first time buyers and also repeat, but more importantly for first time buyers because they are first time experiencing the brand. And for me, as a strategy consultant in the email SMS retention space, I'm thinking about the post purchase journey and what elements should it be kind of incorporating in this journey to make people stick more and not unsubscribe and not kind of churn and all of that. So you talked about identity. What other elements should I be thinking about this post-purchase journey narrative, if I may say?
Yeah, you have the identity framing right away. The second thing I think you should do is create a ritual around the product. So, okay, you have this. You only get results if you take this. My job as a marketer is to convince you to take this after you have breakfast or after you brush your teeth or before you go to bed, whatever the ritual is. My job is to make this part of your lifestyle. That would be another important element to this. Do you want me to also mention transaction related things or like more on the marketing side?
Marketing side and also transactional, like try as much as you can by order, like identity or hitting the identity first, you hit the
Yeah.
ritual.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the transactional piece is of course important. It's more like functional. You need to basically be giving people very clear updates on where the order is. We've received your order. It's on its way. It will arrive soon. It has arrived, and it's functional. There's, of course, you can tease the exciting future that's to come, but for the most part, you just want to be clear so that they know what to expect. On the marketing side, as I said, it's identity framing. It's the sense of having a ritual, as I said, like how do you incorporate this into your lifestyle? Thirdly, it's a sense of uh, progression, whether that's at the end of the month, an email that tells you this is what you've achieved so far, like to kind of take the equivalent benefits you would have had to eat all of this other food, like a truckload of vegetables and things like that. It can be like a tracker. It can be like, any sense of progression that you are having some sort of improvement and you are closer and closer to your goals is great from a retention standpoint. And similarly, any sense of a positive future state is important. What I mean by that is that In most cases, results don't come overnight, and most people are not naturally consistent enough to stick to something that might take 3, 4, 5, 6 months or even a year until it actually materializes. So what you want to do is, on the short term, try as much as possible to get them into the habit of doing it, but also give them consistent dopamine hits by telling them how much their life will improve over time if they keep going. So that's more of a visualizing the future type of play. You also want to be always, again, emphasizing community. You didn't just buy my vitamins. You are now part of a community of 100,000 people that take care of themselves. They are people that don't just settle, but they level up, like that. That sort of thing. Again, this sense of you are part of something bigger than yourself really helps. And then the other thing I would say, which is something that us in retention marketing don't always have the opportunity to do, but we should, because we know how to pull those levers better than anybody else, I think. It's just that brands don't often allow us to do so, is to be involved into the offer structure itself. In other words, think a subscription company, you might be buying this and then you might be getting this once a month, once a quarter, depending on the frequency. Most retention marketers don't have the ability to say that, okay, people cancel on the third month, so let's promise a gift that will arrive with that delivery so that people don't cancel. And then maybe that gift can be a complementary sample of another product. We don't really have the visibility into the brand's products to do that sort of thing, unless we're in-house. In-house marketers tend to do that. Agencies, not so much. So I would say this is another huge element. How can you create moments within the journey that are really pleasant for the recipient? Like, how can you make them feel that they've unlocked something special in a way? And I think that technology plays a role in that. There are tools that allow you to do this in a very simple way. I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Loop Subscriptions, to our friends over at Skill Subscriptions, to our friends at Bubble House, at Lead, and many other great providers that we work with. But I think often the missing piece is the vision and the strategic insight to think about what would the best product be for that. It's not just that you should send them something, but what would the best possible thing you can send them be so that they can get the maximum value from their original purchase without you sacrificing tons of margin. And that takes experience, which again is why I say it's the same how agency marketers like us are not often involved in that sort of discussion. We should. And hopefully there are brands listening in right now and they're getting ideas on what they can do, and hopefully this changes.
Lots of good things to incorporate here, but just I'm worried now. Like I have this worry inside of me. I'm gonna try to make all of this like the identity, the ritual, the progress, community. But what if they have? What if they get this message fatigue? What if they just unsubscribe? Like F off, and I don't want to be kind of getting this anymore. How do I make this balance?
Your question is how can I not overwhelm them, basically, right?
Yes.
I think the main reason why overwhelm happens, I don't have data on this, by the way, so I might be wrong, but the main reason, in my perspective, why this happens is not necessarily because of volume, that there's a lot of messages. It's more that the messages conflict with each other. For example, imagine that you purchase a product, you start having this like beautiful onboarding that we said, starting to receive your transaction on your marketing emails, and so on. And then on top of this, you are receiving promotional campaigns about something else completely. And then when you click those, you go to the website and you see another banner that has another sale. And then from another platform, you receive an SMS. And then boom, a pop-up from a third platform that doesn't recognize you already subscribed, gives you like a third offer. I think that's more what causes frustration in people, because if you are able to plan the messages appropriately, they should be adding value to people, not causing unsubscribes. So if you have a big spike in unsubscribes, probably there's an element of you need to plan the sequence of messages a little bit better. Now, having said this, there's two additional points here. Unsubscribes are not bad, right? It's not a bad thing. if somebody does not want to receive your emails, you should not try to. They should just not be receiving your emails, and you should make your emails for those that want to receive your emails. And some people will, and some people won't. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that there's this assumption, particularly on the retention marketer side, because we, I think, sometimes overthink and over-engineer and are a little bit too close to our work, perhaps a little bit romantic even when it comes to our work, that people are reading every single message we send, and that if the first email in that flow says this, and the second should say that, and the third should say that, because they will consume this first, and this. The reality is that maybe they don't open the first one, maybe they open the second one, or maybe they don't open any and they open all of them in reverse order after a week. This can happen. This actually does happen. So when I say planning the messages well, it's less about email one should say this, email two should say that, and email three should say that. It's more about what is the theme we want to convey in the first 30 days. The theme we want to convey in the first 30 days is you made the right choice, keep going, you're building up towards something good for yourself. That's the main idea that the emails they receive should be conveying, whether it's flows or campaigns or anything else. Now, if it's month 2, month 3, etc., the message and the theme should be you're making progress, people who stay, they get big results, this is why you should stick to it, blah, 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 blah. So that's how I think about this. It's less about the volume, it's more about conflicting messaging, which you can fix with better planning in terms not of a single message, but of what is the theme that you should try to communicate in that stage of the customer journey, which you can very easily, I wouldn't say easily, but maybe easily for me, but you should kind of think about in terms of recency. When did they last purchase? That's the easiest way to understand where they are in the journey. Does this answer your question? I know it was a long.
No, actually, it sounds very reasonable. Like having, you can say this one theme in different kind of ways, even those 30 days. You don't have to be repetitive, from what I'm getting. But you can't be just telling different themes within those 30 days, for example. Right?
Yep.
Okay. That's actually a pretty good kind of way to think about it when it's because for me, I think always about volume. Like they unsubscribe because probably we send too much emails. Let's give them an option to manage their preferences and choose 1 or 2 emails per month, and that could solve the problem. Most people don't actually think about it this way. One more factor that we think about for subscribers is that we always think those are the most loyal customers, those that knows that's the best. So we tend to ask them for feedback about what's upcoming. Maybe we have new flavor, so we ask them to vote. Maybe we have a couple of ideas for a new release, so we ask them which one would make more sense. Do you think this helps reduce churn or the opposite, or what's your thinking about it? And also, what guide rails should be around this so that it doesn't affect us in a bad way?
Yeah, that's a good point there. So I always like to ask why. And there is a very good reason why in this case. There's 2 biases that we're leveraging when we do that. One is, of course, that when you create something, when you help create something, you feel a little bit like you own it, right? It's the ownership bias. And when you involve people into decisions that might be related to the brand or the product, etc., they're much more likely to care because, again, they feel like they were part of creating that and making that decision. That's one. And the second is commitment bias. If you do something, if you start doing something, you are much more likely to finish it. So, Kickstarter, right? Like you start by saying I'm interested in this, and then when it goes live, I will be a customer, right? That sort of thing. You even send money. This is commitment. You will more likely commit to that brand and that idea and that product if you've already started doing so in the past. So it helps in those 2 ways. Now, at the same time, this can be quite risky because in theory, and like everything that I said is true and it makes sense, but there are some things I believe that should never be up to the customer to decide. Like, for example, your brand positioning should be determined by you, the company. You should have your point of view that should be strong enough to attract the right people and repel the wrong people, you shouldn't be making polls about this, right? You shouldn't be having wild, totally out there ideas like suggest anything and then we're gonna do what you want us to do type of thing. Because that is, again, it's gonna push you in directions that might not necessarily match your strategic objectives as a company. What you should potentially consider are things that are like low risk and, in my perspective, at least in most cases, predetermined by you. So more like multiple choice. Which of those four options do you prefer? All four options kind of make sense for the brand. You are letting people choose the one that makes the most sense for your audience, but you are still there kind of setting the rules of what we're choosing, right? It's not totally out there. Another thing that I would say should not be outsourced or crowdsourced is things related to operations, basically, like anything related to pricing, anything related to, I don't know, subscription terms, like that sort of thing, I think should be totally company driven because, of course, the customers might be very smart and they may have the best intentions, but they don't know the information that you know internally. So they, by definition, can't make good decisions for you. So ultimately, I guess the recommendation is to crowdsource low risk options that you as a brand have more or less predetermined. So let people choose the option they like the best rather than define the options themselves. Always protect the brand identity because ultimately that should be something you own. And I would say do this sparingly also. Don't do it constantly. I think it's something that will lose the novelty it has if it's done on a monthly basis. Do it once a year, do it twice a year, but I would say don't do it more often.
And I think it also feels like the community thing that you mentioned. Like most people talk about community, and for them it's like, hey, join our Facebook group or call to action, join, like follow us on socials. But this feels like an actual community, and when you do it like a couple of times. So I think that's a good addition to that as well. So very good chat, GK. Took lots of good notes from here. I think it would be good that we have in the show notes, we will be sharing like a couple of bullet points for a summary for those who don't have the time to listen to our full chat. And I'm looking forward to our next one next week. Thanks for your time.
100%. Thank you for the chat, Mo.